And now my next guest is Paul Dabbar, Undersecretary for Science at the Department of Energy. For any of you that follow me on Twitter, I just reported that that is one of the best jobs, I think the best job, maybe DARPA directors up there too, in the U.S. government today. I think it's just fascinating what he gets to do and think about. Paul is the department's principal advisor on fundamental energy research, energy technologies, and science. Paul, it's great to see you. I'm sorry to butter you up that way, but I love your job, and you got to kind of, but I tell you, it's not all fun and games. You have to make hard choices, right? You have to look at where scarce tax dollars that people are looking at might make the most sense and give you the most leverage in creating strategic leaps. So you're kind of a gambler, an informed gambler. So what is the horizon of things out there you're thinking about today and that Americans might be excited about?
Yeah, I think that's a great example of the challenge and the opportunity we run into every day. It's a little bit like portfolio theory. You're trying to build a portfolio of power plants. I have friends of mine who at the big drug development companies, they're putting money out the door at many different types of drugs at different levels of confidence for it to be developed into something that can be very useful. And at the end of the day, we're here to do the same. I actually have a chart I used at Brookhaven at a speech a couple of years ago, which actually has the portfolio of different quadrants of where we go put money. One quadrant is we have a long history in the area and we know what we're looking for. That's the bulk of the dollars we put out the door at the complex and at universities. And at the other extreme, it's literally pure discovery. And there's a bucket of money that goes into pure discovery. And with $18 billion a year that we have in the non-defense area, we have the benefit of scale so that we can put bets in different quadrants of different science and technology investments.
Paul, a couple of years back, I had the privilege of interviewing then Secretary of Energy Rick Perry. And our conversation was fascinating because it wasn't about energy. It was beyond energy. Supercomputers, quantum, all the things you were doing in healthcare. There's a lot of things that energy research has been able to impact other important questions and challenges in government. I know you think mostly about energy, but I'm just sort of interested in these relevancies that your department has across other fields. Can you share some of that with us?
Yeah, so I like to joke that DOE stands for the Department of Exploration. And if you look at all the different portfolio, energy is probably the best known, what I call to the mass market, but a extremely large amount. Actually, more non-energy R&D and discovery is done at DOE than energy. Even though we're the largest basic discovery in energy in the world of any government, we're actually bigger in the non-energy area. So if you think about the four big national projects that were like dedicated projects, public, private, academia, I think there's been four in this country. The Manhattan Project, the Apollo program, the Digital Revolution, the Human Genome Project. DOE has been a leader in two of them outright and certainly a supporter in the other two. So that's the Manhattan Project and the Human Genome Project that was also started at DOE. We're starting right now, by the way, what we think is probably the fifth one. It could turn into the fifth national project for the United States in S&T, and that's the National Quantum Initiative. We just announced the launch of the quantum internet for the country, for the world, the first one. And we just announced $1 billion, which is the largest research bucket of money ever done by DOE into one program at once, right? Just one kind of announcement. Just shy of $1 billion we announced this last week, where we have 69 entities, including 2 other countries, representing 22 states. It really is, I think, have the makings of a national project. So yeah, I mean, there's just a broad range. I just picked the one that's the latest. But whether it's AI, supercomputing, or bio work, and in this one, quantum, where we're really, I think, kicking it into high gear as of late.
Paul, one of the things that inspired this forum today was Susan Hockfield's book, Living Machines. And, in that book, she's looking at the crossover of different disciplines, biology and energy and engineering, and in that area, I'm just interested in, from your viewpoint, and I know you're in a government role right now, but do you think there are ways we can be smarter about looking at how we fund those convergence points in ways that we're not doing today?
Yeah, that's a great question. She obviously has been a leader in that overlap between materials and biology, and a number of other crosscuts. So I think the important thing for when you have these cross-cutting potentials, so this biology cross-cut, quantum's a cross-cut that cuts across materials and computing and high-energy physics and so on. You need to have institutions that break down historical walls so that people can come together, because those sort of things really are cross-department. So I'll talk from an academic point of view. Many times in the past, universities used to have a life sciences department and then a computer science department, and an engineering department, and there were kind of stovepipes that were there, so that the cross-cut between physics and computing that could lead to quantum, or materials science and biology should work together, like she's been a big advocate for, I think is really important. So I think universities need to think, and they are, by the way, I think they're definitely evolving on how to cross-cut those historical departments so you don't get those stovepipes. And the good thing about the National Lab Complex, the 60,000 people who work at the 617 National Labs, which is the largest basic research organization in the world, is that the whole culture, this is a cultural point, the culture of the DOE National Labs was built on the Manhattan Project, which was not based on a department or a science, it was based on a problem. And so there's a cultural point that DOE is lucky to be pretty far down the road on as part of the core. But I think that cultural and structural aspect to cross-cut for these new ideas is critical.
Paul, I'm so happy you mentioned, I used to work for the Senator of New Mexico, so we had Los Alamos and Sandia there, very familiar with Livermore, and you kind of look at other broad national labs, and this brings me to a question about the ecosystem of all of this. I'm reminded sometimes the frog does not know it's cooking in the pot. We can feel good about the labs, you can feel about what we're good in the science and the billion-dollar quantum initiative, but when you look at China and India and other big investors in science around the world today, are we doing okay compared to them, or are we pleased as we cook in our own pot?
So I think there's a mix of we should be positive, and we should be highly neurotic. I'm a big fan of being neurotic, and pushing the bounds of things forward and not being complacent. In some respects, things are positive for a lot of the sciences. Our particular area, we're up 32% since we've been here as a leadership team because of bipartisan support. What I'd like to say is that people have been saying we haven't been investing enough in the sciences at the federal level. People have been talking about that for 2 decades. Well, this Congress and this president actually approved budgets to dramatically move NASA and dramatically move the DOE national labs and dramatically move NIH, amongst others. So I think we're very positive about that. Clearly there's, in particular, China is a unique competitor to the United States compared to others over the last 100 years in terms of their focus in this particular area and human resource capabilities, people capabilities. But I do want to say one thing about, makes me at least cautiously optimistic that if we do things right with all the policy points and funding points, is that whenever there's a command and control economy, of which clearly China's a command and controlled, effectively a dictatorship and with a central command. And when you have a central command economy, which defines where money and focus should be going in terms of what technology should be focused on 5G and who's going to be the winner from this company or that company, it freezes out ideas. And the most important thing is that most of the ideas that come up with all these different things that have happened, like the digital revolution and DARPA in 1969, wasn't that the government said this is the way to go with the digital revolution. It was having a culture of collaboration between government, academia, and the private sector, and allow the interesting idea that no one had thought of to bubble up and for people to invest money into it publicly and privately. And the command and control of China has a possibility of them picking a technology, saying, this is the one to invest in. And it actually freezes out other people's interest because they think if they come up with a better idea, it's not going to gain any traction because the central government has decided the other idea is going to win.
Yeah, I've always thought that, science was the process of getting clarity out of creative chaos. So I love how you just described the importance of that. We have a question from the audience from Zach. Zach?
Hi, my name is Zach Valdez. I manage career services and K-12 programming for the Society of Hispanic Professional Engineers across the United States, but I'm located here in Washington, D.C. My question is, what realistic policies can protect and promote scientific advancement in 2021? Thank you.
Thank you, Zach. Well, that's a good general question. How can we protect, I guess, the franchise of science in 2021?
Well, I will advocate certainly, first of all, is to continue the momentum that the federal system has been putting money into it. So I think that has not only has the money been helpful, but I think the cultural aspects and the people being positive and bringing in others. Having come from private sector for half of my career, I like to think that the federal government should be like seed money so that we put money in and hopefully it draws interest in from other parties. So and by the way, that happened with the National Quantum Initiative. We have an over 50% contribution from the federal investment. So we're sucking in interest in the terms of actual money from others riding what we're doing. So I think that's a big part of it. The next part that we have not moved forward on, the federal system has, the private sector is still behind where it should be and has not picked up from its relatively low percentage of its investments in R&D compared to the Bell Labs timeframe. So I think that as people think about public policy to encourage the private sector to catch up, to start getting on that curve, that the federal system has clearly changed in the last 3 years. I think from a public policy point of view, I think encouraging the private sector is something for people to look at.
Paul, this is so cool. I'm going to tell everybody they can follow. I've been reading about your work in nuclear, your work across the energy field, renewables, everything about how technology is going to be a game changer for a lot of these technologies that have seemed like we know them. But I would tell people, don't think about today. Think 5-10 years out. And your Twitter feed, which I think is a very cool Twitter, @ScienceUndersec. You can read about Paul's stuff. Paul, Ellen Stofan is coming on next. What tough question? She's the smartest person I know on Mars. What tough question would you ask her?
So, Mars is one of the most exciting things, I think, if you want to look at national projects that have possibilities. As I said, the National Quantum Initiative could be the fifth. I think the NASA Moon to Mars project could be another national project. It certainly has that set up. And so I think, there's a number of things Perseverance is testing in terms of technologies that are going to be important to be tested on the moon that could be used for Mars. I think really asking that about, what are the most important specific technologies that need to be tested out on the moon so that we can get to Mars? What are the most important technologies she see around to be developed?
I think it's time we get to the Ellen Stofan playbook on that. And we've got her online now. Paul, thank you. Paul Dabbar, Undersecretary of Energy for Science. Again, the coolest job in town I know in government. Thank you so much for joining us.